One simple phone call, a woman's curiosity, and a decision that changed her life forever. Who was a stranger on the other end? And why did answering that call lead to a terrifying journey she couldn't escape? Stick around to find out what happened to Sarah, and why the truth might be darker than you could ever imagine. It was a quiet evening, and Sarah sat alone in her cozy living room, curled up on her favorite armchair. The world outside was quiet too, with a soft, steady patter of rain tapping lightly against the window. The rhythmic sound of the rain created a peaceful ambience, and for a moment, Sarah allowed herself to just breathe and relax. She had been feeling a little off lately, like something was missing, but tonight she was determined to unwind. Her book was open, and the soft flicker of the living room lamp illuminated the pages in front of her. She was ready to escape into her story, if only for a while. Just as she was about to lose herself in the pages, her phone buzzed. The sudden vibration broke the peaceful silence in the room. Sarah glanced at her phone on the coffee table, frowning slightly. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, and the idea of answering a call from someone she didn't know made her hesitate. But curiosity got the better of her. Who could it be at this time of night? With a sigh, she picked up the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Hello?" she answered, trying to sound casual, despite the flicker of uncertainty that ran through her. There was a brief silence on the other end, a pause that made her wonder if the call had been a mistake or a wrong number. But then, a deep voice spoke, low and steady, as though trying to hide its urgency. "Sarah, I need your help. It's urgent. Can you meet me?" Sarah's brow furrowed. The voice was familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. She couldn't recall anyone who would be calling her at this hour, especially with such an odd request. Her heart began to race, and she felt a wave of confusion wash over her. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her fingers instinctively tightening around the phone as her unease grew. "I'm someone who knows you," the voice continued, its tone becoming more insistent. "I know you can help me. Please, I don't have much time. Meet me at the old diner on Maple Street in an hour." The word struck Sarah like a bolt of lightning. A diner on Maple Street? That was an old, run-down place on the outskirts of town, one that Sarah hadn't visited in years. It was as if the stranger knew exactly where to send her, like they had been watching her, planning this moment. A chill crept up her spine, and for the briefest of seconds, she considered hanging up and letting the moment pass. She had a feeling, deep in her gut, that something wasn't right. The call was too strange, too sudden. But then again, there was something compelling about it. Something in the man's voice, the desperation, the urgency, made her wonder if someone was truly in trouble. Maybe someone needed her help. Maybe she was the only one who could make a difference. She wasn't the type to shy away from someone in need, even if she didn't understand the situation. But the doubt in her mind lingered. Who is this? What's going on? Sarah asked again, but the line was already dead. The call had ended abruptly, leaving her holding her phone in silence. She stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. What was that? Who had just called her, and why did they sound so desperate? Her mind spun, piecing together fragments of the conversation, trying to make sense of the strange request. But nothing fit. The more she thought about it, the more unsettling it felt. There was no way this could be a coincidence. Something was off. But then, as the silence in the room grew heavier, Sarah realized something. She was curious. A part of her, perhaps the smallest part, was intrigued. The thought of finding out what this was all about, what the stranger truly wanted, gnawed at her. She found herself pacing the living room, trying to talk herself out of it, but the pull to go was too strong. With a sigh, Sarah grabbed a jacket and keys. What harm could it do? She muttered to herself, though her voice betrayed the uncertainty she felt. Maybe she could just drive by the diner and see if anyone was there. If things felt off, she could always leave. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. The stranger had specifically mentioned her name, and that alone meant this was not an ordinary situation. She was being drawn into something she couldn't yet understand. The drive to the diner felt longer than it should have. The rain continued to fall heavily, casting a cold, dark shroud over the town. The streets were empty, save for the occasional passing car. As Sarah approached the diner, a knot formed in her stomach. The place was exactly how she remembered it, old, dilapidated, and barely standing. The neon sign flickered erratically above the door, casting an eerie glow across the parking lot. Her headlights reflected off the wet pavement as she pulled into the nearly empty lot. Her breath caught in her throat. The diner had always been quiet, but tonight it felt different. Sarah hesitated for a moment, sitting in her car, looking at the darkened windows of the diner. Her mind screamed at her to turn around and drive away. But her hand, almost as if it had a mind of its own, reached for the door handle. The call had been too mysterious to ignore. She needed to know who had called her, and why. With one last deep breath, Sarah stepped out into the rain, pulling her collar up against the chill, and walked toward the door. Something told her that by the time this night was over, her life would be changed forever. Despite the unease settling in her chest, Sarah couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this phone call was something more than just a prank. The urgency in the stranger's voice was too real, too desperate to be ignored. It tugged at her, raising questions in her mind that she couldn't quite answer. Who would need her help at this hour? And why? Could someone truly be in trouble? Was this a call for help? Or had she just become caught in something strange, something she didn't fully understand? She sat there for what felt like an eternity, her mind racing. On one hand, she wanted to dismiss the whole thing as a mistake. Maybe it was a wrong number, or just some prankster on the other end. But on the other hand, the man's voice, with its low and urgent tone, felt genuine. It resonated with a sincerity she couldn't ignore. Could someone be in real danger, and was she the one person who could do something about it? After a few moments of internal debate, Sarah realized that she couldn't just sit there wondering what might have been. She needed to find out for herself. What harm could it do? She muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the beating of her heart. She quickly grabbed her jacket from the back of the chair, tossed it over her shoulders, and snatched her car keys off the counter. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest, but the need to resolve the mystery pushed her forward. As she stepped outside into the cool, damp evening, the chill of the air hit her like a sudden wave, sending a shiver down her spine. The rain had picked up, now falling steadily in thick sheets that created a constant hiss as it hit the pavement. She pulled her collar up against the cold and dashed at her car, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the rain. The city around her felt strangely quiet, as if it was holding its breath. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional car that passed by, its headlights barely cutting through the thick downpour. Sarah slid into the driver's seat of her car, the leather of the seat cold against her skin. She took a deep breath and turned the key, the engine sputtering to life. Her headlights cut through the gloom, casting weak light onto the rain-slick streets ahead. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour, clearing only enough of a view to make her realize just how alone she was. The eerie quiet outside, combined with the storm, seemed to amplify the tension in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that she was about to enter an unknown world, a place she had never intended to be. Yet, there was something almost magnetic about the pull to go. She couldn't explain it, but every fiber of her being was telling her she had to find out what the call had been about. As she drove through the empty streets, the city felt like a distant memory, its normal, lively energy replaced with a silent, almost ominous stillness. The buildings blurred past her, and the glow from the streetlights created pools of yellow light on the wet road. The rain pounded harder against the car, adding a sense of isolation to the night. Each turn she made seemed to lead her further away from the familiar, the comfortable, and closer to the unknown. It was as though the city had fallen asleep, and she was the only one awake in the dark. The drive felt long, and by the time she reached Maple Street, her nerves were stretched thin. The old diner, a relic of another era, loomed ahead, its sign flickering faintly in the distance. Sarah's grip on the steering wheel tightened as she pulled into the parking lot. The diner looked as it always had, old, run down, and almost forgotten. But tonight, under the heavy rain and dim lights, it felt different. The flickering neon sign above the door cast an eerie glow, illuminating the wet pavement below, but the lot was strangely deserted. Sarah looked around, expecting to see at least a few cars, maybe a couple of other people milling about. But there was nothing. Not a single vehicle, except for her own. A knot formed in Sarah's stomach. The loneliness of the place, coupled with the storm, made it feel even more abandoned. The diner had always been a quiet spot, but tonight it seemed especially isolated, like it had been waiting for her, waiting for someone to come. Her heartbeat quickened, and she glanced at the clock on the dashboard. The time was right, just as the stranger had said. But where was everyone? Shouldn't there be someone here? She squinted through the rain, peering into the window of the diner. The lights inside were dim, casting shadows across the empty booths. It didn't seem to make sense. If this was a place to meet, why was it so deserted? Despite the unsettling sight, Sarah pushed the thoughts aside. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She took a deep breath and told herself that everything would be fine. Maybe the stranger hadn't arrived yet. Maybe they were just running late. After all, what harm could there be in staying a few minutes to see what would happen? Sarah slowly turned off the car, the engine's hum fading into the sound of the rain. She sat there for a moment, just looking at the diner, trying to convince herself that everything would be fine. But as the minutes passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She hadn't expected it to feel this eerie, this empty. Still, her curiosity outweighed her hesitation. With a deep breath, she stepped out of the car, pulling her jacket tighter around her, and walked toward the diner's door, her footsteps muffled by the heavy rain. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she was about to find out. As Sarah stepped through the door of the diner, the familiar hum of the flickering neon sign above greeted her. The warm, buzzing light was the only thing that seemed alive in the otherwise still, dimly lit space. The diner had seen better days, the vinyl booths worn and the tables scratched, but it still held a certain charm. It was the kind of place that felt like it hadn't changed in years. A place where time moved slowly, tucked away from the world outside. Yet, tonight, it felt different, off somehow. The low murmur of conversation mixed with the clinking of cutlery. There were only a few patrons scattered around the booths, their faces shrouded in the shadows of the dim lighting. Each person sat alone, lost in their own world, their presence somehow adding to the eerie, tense atmosphere. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and greasy food. Sarah's eyes quickly scanned the room, her heartbeat quickening. She wasn't sure why, but the place seemed more deserted than it should have been, and it made her skin crawl. The only thing that seemed alive in the space was a quiet hum of the neon sign. Behind the counter, an older woman with gray hair stood, her eyes weary but sharp. As Sarah walked in, the waitress barely glanced up from the glass she was cleaning. When Sarah reached the counter, the woman set the glass down, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked up at Sarah with a look that combined concern and curiosity. "You're the one they called for." The waitress's voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was a certain urgency in it. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, as if expecting someone, or something. Sarah nodded, still unsure what she was walking into. "I'm here to meet someone. I received a call." The waitress didn't speak for a moment, her wrinkled face softening in what Sarah could only interpret as fear. Then, with a sigh, she motioned toward the back of the diner, where a lone figure sat in a booth by the window, shrouded in the shadows. "He's waiting for you," she said in a voice that trembled just a little. "Back there." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There was something about the way the waitress spoke, hesitant and careful, that only increased the unease she was already feeling. She swallowed hard and took a step forward, her feet feeling heavy as she crossed the worn tile floor, each step echoing in the otherwise quiet diner. She tried to steady herself, but the knot in her stomach tightened with each move she made toward the back of the diner. The booth was tucked into a shadowy corner, isolated from the rest of the room. A dim light hung overhead, casting a soft glow on the table, but leaving the rest of the space draped in darkness. The man sitting there was partially hidden by the hood of his jacket, the shadow falling over his face, making it hard to make out any details. Sarah's pulse quickened as she approached the booth, and with every step, the air around her seemed to thicken. She couldn't help but wonder if she was walking into something she couldn't control. When she reached the booth, the man looked up slowly. His face remained partially hidden, but his eyes were visible, dark, intense eyes that studied her with a quiet, almost unnerving scrutiny. There was something about the way he looked at her, something that made her feel exposed, like he was sizing her up, measuring her reaction. "Are you Sarah?" he asked, his voice calm but firm, with an edge of authority that sent another chill down her spine. "Yes, I am," Sarah replied, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. She didn't know if it was the darkness of the booth or the man's unnerving presence, but she could feel her anxiety mounting. "What's going on? Why did you call me? Who are you?" The man sighed, a soft sound, as if he had been waiting for this question. He slowly pulled down his hood, revealing a face that seemed vaguely familiar, though Sarah couldn't place it. His features were sharp, his jaw clenched tightly as though he was holding back something, anger, frustration, or maybe even fear. But there was something about him that struck her as both comforting and unsettling at the same time. "My name is Thomas," he said, his voice lower now, as if he was about to share something important. "I need your help to uncover something dangerous. You're the only one who can do it." Sarah's confusion deepened. "Dangerous," she repeated, her eyebrows furrowing as she took a cautious step closer to the booth. "What kind of danger? And why me? I don't know you, and you don't know me." Thomas's gaze softened slightly, but his expression remained serious. "It's complicated," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you've been involved in something much bigger than you realize. They are watching you, Sarah. They've been watching all of us." Sarah's heart pounded as she processed his words. She had no idea what he was talking about, but the fear in his voice was real, and the way he spoke made her feel as though she had just stepped into a world she was never meant to be part of. She stood there, unsure of what to say, the weight of the moment pressing on her. "Who's watching me?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the answer, but she had no choice. She needed to know. Thomas leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he lowered his voice even further. "It's a group. Powerful people. People who know what you're capable of. And they won't stop until they get what they want." Sarah's head spun. What was he talking about? What did he mean by capable? And why had he picked her? "Help me," he urged quietly, his gaze intense. "Please, we don't have much time." As she stood there, unsure of what to do, a cold realization began to set in. There was no turning back now. Whatever Thomas was about to reveal, whatever danger he spoke of, it was already too late for her to walk away. She had already answered the call. And now, she had to face whatever came next. The man leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, as though every word he spoke carried a weight too heavy to be shared loudly. His eyes locked onto Sarah's, intense and unwavering, as he continued, "I've been investigating a secret operation. There are people involved, dangerous people, and they are watching you. They know you're here now, and they won't stop until they have what they want." Sarah's heart began to race as she absorbed the gravity of his words. 1,000 questions flooded her mind, each one more frantic than the last. Who were these people? Why was she involved? Why? She tried to steady her breathing, but her pulse was pounding in her ears, and she could feel her palms growing clammy. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a beginning of something that felt too big for her to understand. She opened her mouth to ask more, but nothing came out at first. The weight of the situation made her feel as though the walls of the diner were closing in on her. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, betraying the fear that was building inside of her. "Why me? I'm just a regular person. I don't know what you're talking about." The man's expression didn't soften, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, almost like regret. He exhaled slowly, as if gathering the strength to explain something far beyond her comprehension. "Because you have a connection to someone they are targeting. Someone important. They've been tracking your every move for weeks, maybe even months. They are watching you, Sarah, and you're the only one who can stop them." His words seemed to hang in the air, like a heavy fog that was slowly clouding her understanding of the reality she thought she knew. Sarah felt as though she were trapped in a nightmare where nothing made sense. She had no idea who these people were, or what connection she could possibly have to any of them. She was just an ordinary woman, living her life. But now, the fear in Thomas's eyes told her that whatever was unfolding was bigger than anything she could have imagined. She opened her mouth again, desperate for more answers, but before she could get another word out, the atmosphere in the diner shifted. A loud screeching sound tore through the silence, a car coming to a violent halt outside. The noise was sharp and jarring, like a warning shot, and it pierced the tension that had been building between them. Thomas's face went pale in an instant, his eyes widening with alarm. The color drained from his features, and the calm demeanor he had held up until now cracked. Sarah watched in disbelief as he shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "They are here," Thomas said, his voice now laced with panic. "You need to leave. Now." Before she could even process what was happening, he moved with frightening speed, grabbing his jacket and rushing toward the back door of the diner. He didn't look back, not even once, as he pushed through the door and disappeared into the night, leaving Sarah alone in the booth. The room seemed to go still, even as her heart raced, pounding in her chest like a drumbeat. She could hear her breath coming in short, shallow gasps as her mind scrambled to catch up with the rapid turn of events. The diner, which had felt so empty and quiet only moments before, now felt like a trap closing around her. What was happening? What was so urgent that Thomas had to run? Why had he left her here? Before she could move, the door to the diner swung open again, this time with a violent force, as if someone had kicked it in. Sarah's eyes snapped toward the entrance, her body frozen in place. A group of men entered, all dressed in dark clothing, black jackets, dark pants, and their eyes scanning the room with predatory precision. They looked like they belonged to a world Sarah didn't know. They didn't speak at first, just surveyed the space, their gaze moving slowly over the empty booths before locking on her. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as their eyes met. There was no mistaking it. They had found her. Her throat went dry, and she felt the blood drain from her face. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The weight of their stare was suffocating, and for a brief moment, she thought she might faint right there in the middle of the diner. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, took a slow, deliberate step toward her. His cold gaze never left hers. The others followed suit, standing in a loose circle around her, closing her in. She could hear the sound of their footsteps, the scrape of their shoes against the floor. The air in the diner had become thick with tension, and Sarah felt as though the world around her had gone silent. Her mind raced for an escape plan, but nothing came to her. The door was behind them, but it was impossible to run without being seen. The windows were sealed tight, offering no way out. There was nowhere to go. She was trapped, and these men, whatever they wanted, were going to make sure she couldn't leave without giving them what they sought. "Sarah," the man with the scar said, his voice low and dangerous, "it's time to come with us." Sarah's heart stopped. This was no longer a conversation. This was a confrontation. And whatever Thomas had gotten her into, she was in it now, whether she wanted to be or not. The moment she answered that call, she had sealed her fate. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah's legs moved faster than she ever thought possible. Her heart pounded in her chest as the blood rushed to her ears, drowning out everything but the sound of her feet pounding against the wet floor of the diner. The door swung open behind her, and the sound of the men shouting intensified, but she couldn't afford to look back. She had to get out, had to escape whatever nightmare she had just walked into. Her breath came in short, frantic gasps as her mind raced, trying to process the chaos of the situation. What had just happened? Who were those men? And what did they want from her? She had no answers, only the instinct to run. The city was a blur around her, the rain falling harder, obscuring her vision as she dashed toward her car. Her shoes slipped on the wet pavement, making every step feel like she was wading through quicksand. But there was no time to slow down. The urge to survive, to get away from whatever danger was closing in on her, was too strong. She reached her car, her fingers trembling as she fumbled for the door handle. It was like a beacon of safety. If she could just get inside, start the engine, and drive away, she could escape this madness. But as she reached out for the handle, her arm was grabbed with a sudden force. Her body jerked backward, and before she could react, she was pulled off her feet. A voice, harsh and unfamiliar, yelled her name from behind her. "Sarah!" The voice called, a male tone filled with menace. It wasn't the man from the diner. This voice was gruff, angry, one of the men from the group. "You won't get away that easily." Her breath hitched in her throat as panic flooded her system. She struggled against the grip on her arm, her mind racing for a way to break free. She could hear the man's footsteps as he dragged her back, the others no doubt closing in on her as well. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew one thing. There was no escaping them. No matter how far she ran, no matter how much she tried to outrun the fear, they were faster. They were closer. The cold rain soaked her clothes, clinging to her skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill of the hand gripping her arm. It was as though her body had frozen in place. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, her panic rising with every passing second. She had to think, had to do something. But in that moment, all of her thoughts scattered. She couldn't even form a coherent plan. She was at their mercy, and mercy wasn't something she expected from these men. The man yanked her closer, pulling her toward him. She tried to scream, to fight, but he clamped down hard on her arm, forcing her into submission. His face loomed closer, his breath hot against her ear. "You've made a big mistake, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You should have stayed out of this." Her mind raced back to Thomas's words. "They're watching you. They've been watching your every move." The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This was what he had been talking about. She had stumbled into something dangerous, something she wasn't equipped to handle. She wasn't just some random woman who had answered a wrong number. No, she was caught in a tangled web of people who had no intention of letting her go. "Let go of me," she shouted, twisting in his grip. But it was no use. His hold on her was unrelenting. She scanned the area around her, hoping for some kind of miracle. Maybe someone would hear her, maybe she could break free. But the street was deserted. The rain fell in sheets, obscuring everything in front of her, and the light from the street lamps barely cut through the darkness. It was as though the world had swallowed her up, leaving her alone with these men, in the middle of the night, with nowhere to run. As the man dragged her back toward the diner, Sarah's mind swirled with thoughts of escape. She knew she couldn't give up, couldn't let them take her wherever they were planning to. But the fear was starting to take over. She felt powerless, smaller than she'd ever felt before. But before she could fully process the realization that her struggle was futile, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. Her thoughts, once frantic, now slowed. For some reason, she had no doubt that this was it. She was caught. There was no going back. The stranger's call had led her to this moment, and the moment would now define her fate. No one would know what happened to her. She was alone in a world where no one was looking out for her. Her fate, sealed the moment she'd answered that call, was now in the hands of these men. And just like that, Sarah vanished into the night, her footsteps lost in the rain, her figure swallowed by the shadows. The world would never know what had truly happened to the woman who answered a stranger's call and never came back. As time passed, her disappearance would remain a mystery, a chilling reminder of a moment where fate twisted her life beyond recognition. The woman who had answered the phone, who had stepped into a world of darkness, would remain just another shadow in the night, a name on a missing persons list, a story that would never be fully told.